A passport doesn't make you free. In fact, sometimes it silences you. The woman you're about to meet didn't just survive poverty, she survived fear, injustice, and being silenced. She spent the first 20 years of her life with her voice buried inside, but then she found her words again. And today, she's helping shape the future from inside the halls of a foreign parliament. This isn't just her story. This is the story of every woman who refused to stay quiet. Listen closely, because Charlotte might just be speaking for all of us.
My name is Charlotte, but that wasn't the name I was born with. It's the name I chose when my life started over. In my first life, my name came with labels: poor, silenced, forgotten. I come from a place so small, it's barely noticeable on a map. A place where women walk with their eyes down, where silence is survival, where dreams are dangerous. My father used to be a journalist, a good one. One day, 3 men came to our home. They took his camera, broke his pen, and after that, my father never spoke again. From then on, our house lived in whispers. My mother? She was a quiet warrior. Her hands cracked from washing clothes in freezing water, her back bowed from the weight of 5 children and no choices. She never complained, but her eyes, they carried a kind of tiredness no sleep could fix. We were 5 siblings. Food was never enough. We'd share notebooks, sometimes even take turns going to school, because we only had 1 pair of shoes. But the hardest part wasn't hunger, it was being told that dreaming wasn't for us. I was 10 when I found a torn book on the sidewalk. The cover was missing, but the pages were still there. It was Brave New World. I couldn't sleep that night. The world inside that book was nothing like mine. That night, I asked myself, could I ever live in a world like that? There was no answer. But the question stayed with me. When I got my first period at 13, my mom gently said, "You're a woman now." But the truth was, I'd been forced to grow up long before that. At 14, I started sneaking into an internet cafe. I cleaned houses to afford an hour at a time. I'd watch American TV shows with subtitles, and that's how I started learning English. There's one sentence I'll never forget. You have the right to remain silent. In my country, silence isn't a right, it's a rule. At 16, one of my classmates was married off. There was no light left in her eyes. The neighbors looked at me and said, "You're next." They asked, "Who's your fiancé?" And I said, "I have a dream." They laughed, but I never stopped dreaming. When I was 17, I heard about a scholarship opportunity in a European country. I spent weeks running from office to office to collect every document. I didn't even have a passport, but I applied anyway. Weeks later, I got the email that changed my life. I had been accepted. I still remember my mom cooking dinner when I told her. She said, "Don't go. It's far, it's cold, it's not home." And I said, if I stay here, I'll never come back to myself. That night, I packed quietly. 2 shirts, 1 notebook, and $30. When I landed, the first thing I felt wasn't cold. It wasn't culture shock. It was guilt. Because I got to leave, and they were still there. I cleaned buildings. My hands froze. My back ached. People mispronounced my name, and I didn't always have the words to correct them. At night, I cried quietly, and in the morning, I kept going. When I got my first paycheck, I held it to my face. It smelled like my mother's hands. That day, I cried. I finished college. I got my master's degree. Today, I'm 41. I work in urban policy, helping shape future cities in a European government. Every morning, when I walk into that building, with polished floors and high ceilings, there's still a voice inside me that whispers, "Do you really belong here?" And every time I hear that voice, I picture my 10-year-old self, standing barefoot in a dusty yard, looking at the sky through laundry lines. She's still inside me. And today, if I can speak, it's because her silenced voice finally broke free. Maya, thank you for helping me share that voice. Because now, I don't just speak for myself. I carry the voices of so many women who never got the chance. But this voice didn't come easy. In those early years, speaking someone else's language, always being misunderstood. No matter what I said, the look in their eyes said it all. She doesn't belong here. Sometimes they said it with a smile, sometimes without a word, but I always felt it. When you're a migrant, you don't just carry your passport. You carry your past, your pain, your shame, your silence, and most of all, you carry your invisibility. During school holidays, everyone talked to their families. I stayed quiet. My mom was still washing dishes in a kitchen far away, her hands still cracked, her back still tired. Meanwhile, I was in a warm library on another continent. Half of me felt guilty. The other half was still learning how to forgive myself. At graduation, everyone had their parents by their side. I had a small blue scarf my mother gave me years ago. I kept it in my pocket. I didn't cry that day, because I thought if I did, that fragile little girl inside me would come back. But years later, I realized being strong doesn't mean holding back tears. Being strong means carrying them with pride. After graduation, I started an internship in a government office. On my first day, someone asked me, "So, are you here short-term, or is this just a project thing?" I smiled, but inside I thought, I'm not temporary. I've burned, I've broken, I've rebuilt myself to be here. Over time, people started listening. At meetings, heads stopped looking down, and slowly, faces started turning toward me. One day, after I gave a presentation, a male colleague looked at me and said, "You don't seem like someone who grew up in a place like this." He was right. I didn't grow up. I survived. And sometimes surviving is harder than growing up. Being a woman in politics isn't easy, especially for someone like me. My past wasn't seen as private. It was seen as suspicious. At male-dominated tables, I had to work 3 times harder to earn respect. Each step up felt lonelier. But with every step, I saw myself more clearly. I never tried to hide my femininity. I didn't deepen my voice to sound stronger. I didn't borrow their tone. I found power in my own. Eventually, I was granted citizenship. When I held that passport in my hands, I thought, I don't have to leave anymore. But staying, that's my choice. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, I don't need anyone's permission anymore. I chose to stay. Because this country didn't just give me rights, it gave me responsibility. Today, I help shape the very policies that design tomorrow's cities, and I know no matter where we live, being a woman is still a fight. But now, I don't fight with fear. I fight with purpose, with power, and with sisterhood. I don't reject my past. I carry it. Because what made me isn't just what I achieved, it's what I survived. Even now, when I write letters to my mother, some sentences blur with tears. I still think about those little girls in my old neighborhood. If one of them ever hears this story, I hope she thinks, if she could do it, so can I. And Maya, thank you for letting this voice be heard by thousands. Because I still carry that little girl who looked up at the sky through clotheslines. And now, that sky belongs to all of us.
Charlotte's story isn't just about success, it's about how a silenced voice can reshape the world. And that's exactly why Sisterhood Speaks exists. Because here, we don't just talk, we listen to each other. If her story moves something in your heart, share it. Subscribe. Let someone else hear it too. Because here, no woman stands alone.